All right, so are you ready to dive into this?
Absolutely. I'm really fascinated by this one.
Yeah, because you sent over this 5-page analysis
Huh?
of your take on the 2024 election.
Mm.
And I gotta say,
Yeah.
this was not your average election year.
No, it really wasn't.
Yeah.
What's fascinating to me is that it wasn't just a win for Trump. It completely reshaped the political map.
Okay, so first shocker, Donald Trump is back in the White House. 312 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 226.
Oh,
And you even highlighted that in your notes.
yeah.
But here's the thing.
Hmm.
He flipped several states that went blue in 2020. We're
Really?
talking Arizona,
Uh-huh.
Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Wow.
That's not just a win.
No.
That's a seismic shift.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
it reveals a potential realignment of
Yeah.
American politics, particularly in those Rust Belt and Sun Belt states.
So why the swing back to Trump? Your analysis points to economic anxiety being a major factor.
Absolutely. Inflation was a big theme throughout the campaign and hit those swing states particularly hard.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the numbers.
Right.
Many voters felt that the Biden administration wasn't addressing the root causes, like supply chain issues and energy policy.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Your analysis highlights how Trump tapped into this frustration.
Yeah.
Not just with economic promises, but with a narrative that resonated with certain demographics.
Right.
He painted a picture of a lost America,
Yeah.
a country struggling because of bad deals and weak leadership.
And that message,
Right.
combined with a sense of general discontent with the Biden administration, created a powerful recipe for change. Some voters felt the country was heading in the wrong direction and were willing to take a gamble on a familiar face, even one with a controversial past.
But it wasn't just a rejection of Biden. Your notes point out that Trump's base turned out in record numbers.
Yeah.
They were energized,
Yeah.
organized, and fiercely loyal.
And that base, combined with the swing voters motivated by economic anxiety and discontent, proved to be an unstoppable force.
Now let's talk about Kamala Harris's campaign. She ran on a platform focused on climate change, healthcare, and social justice. You highlighted that these issues were important to you as well.
Yeah.
So why couldn't she hold on to the 2020 coalition?
Well, part of it may have been a miscalculation of priorities.
Okay.
While these issues are undoubtedly important,
Yeah.
they might not have been top of mind for voters grappling with immediate economic concerns.
It's like you said in your notes, the Democrats might have been speaking to a different America, one that wasn't as focused on those progressive issues.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The analysis suggests they might have underestimated the depth of the economic anxieties and the appeal of Trump's populist rhetoric. They were playing a different game on a different field.
And it wasn't just the presidency. The Republicans completely took over Congress. You marked this in your analysis.
Yes.
With a big red exclamation point.
A red wave indeed.
Wow.
A unified Republican government with a majority in both the Senate and an expanded majority in the House.
Okay.
This gives them unprecedented power to push their agenda.
So what can we expect? What does this new landscape mean for key policy areas, especially the ones you highlighted in your analysis? Healthcare, climate change, immigration, and foreign policy.
Well, on healthcare, your analysis predicts significant changes to the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
Potentially even attempts to repeal or replace it altogether.
And what about climate change, an issue you're clearly passionate about?
Yeah.
What does a unified Republican government mean for environmental policy?
That's where things get a bit concerning. The analysis suggests a potential reversal of Biden-era regulations, a shift towards fossil fuels, and a possible withdrawal from international climate agreements.
Which you noted could have devastating consequences, not just for the U.S., but for the entire planet.
Exactly. The U.S. plays a critical role in global climate action. And this shift in policy could have ripple effects around the world.
Okay, so big changes potentially on the horizon for healthcare and climate.
Right.
What about immigration? Your analysis predicts a return to Trump's America First approach. But what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, America First in this context implies a focus on stricter border controls, limitations on legal immigration, and a potentially more isolationist stance on global affairs.
Right.
We could see increased deportations, a reduction in refugee admissions, and a tougher stance on asylum seekers.
Which, as you noted in your analysis, could have a profound impact on families and communities.
Absolutely.
Especially those who are already marginalized. We're talking about real lives.
Yes. Real people caught in the crosshairs of policy changes.
Absolutely. And these policy shifts could also have economic implications.
Oh.
Limiting immigration can impact labor markets.
Yeah.
Particularly in industries that rely on immigrant workers.
So it's not just about borders and security.
No.
It's about the fabric of American society and the economy as well.
Precisely.
Now, one of the most surprising things about this election was the shift in demographics. It wasn't just a simple red versus blue divide.
Yeah.
Your analysis points to some fascinating trends that go beyond the usual partisan lines.
You're right. This is where the analysis gets really interesting.
Okay.
It wasn't just about flipping existing voters. It was about attracting new ones.
Right.
Trump saw increased support from Hispanic voters, especially in key swing states like Florida, Texas, and Arizona.
But WHY? What drove this shift?
The analysis suggests a combination of factors.
Okay.
Economic concerns played a role.
But so did messaging that resonated with certain cultural values.
So it wasn't just about policy.
Right.
It was about identity and belonging as well.
Exactly. And we saw similar trends with suburban voters.
Yeah.
Another group that Trump lost ground with in 2020.
Okay.
This time, he managed to win back a significant portion of this demographic.
And even among younger voters, there was a shift, right?
Yes. Yeah. While still favoring Democrats overall.
Yeah.
The youth vote showed a smaller margin for Harris compared to Biden's performance in 2020.
Okay.
Economic concerns, particularly student debt and job prospects, seem to have played a significant role.
And then there's the most unexpected trend, a slight uptick in support for Trump among African-American voters.
This is a small but significant shift.
Really?
While this demographic still overwhelmingly supports the Democratic Party, even a slight change in voting patterns can have a ripple effect in a close election.
So what does all of this tell us? What are the key takeaways from these demographic shifts?
It tells us that the political landscape is more fluid than ever before.
Okay.
It's not just about demographics.
Right.
It's about understanding how those demographics intersect with economic anxieties, cultural concerns, and evolving political priorities.
You highlighted in your analysis that the old assumptions about who votes for whom no longer apply.
Exactly. This election has thrown those assumptions out the window.
Right.
We need to look beyond the surface and delve into the nuances of voter motivations and anxieties.
So we've got a Trump presidency, a Republican-controlled Congress, and a whole lot of uncertainty about what the future holds. But before we get to that, let's take a look at the international reaction. How did the world respond to this political earthquake?
Well, it was a mix of surprise, concern, and in some cases, cautious optimism.
Okay.
European allies, many of whom were relieved by Biden's return to traditional diplomacy after Trump's more disruptive approach, are now bracing for a potential return to uncertainty and unpredictability.
You specifically highlighted the concern over Trump's transactional diplomacy and its potential impact on global alliances, particularly NATO.
Exactly. NATO members are worried about renewed pressure on defense spending and a potential weakening of the alliance's collective security framework.
And what about Asia? You noted that the reactions there were mixed as well.
Absolutely. Japan and South Korea, while cautiously optimistic about a strong stance on North Korea, are also concerned about potential trade disputes and disruptions to regional stability. China, on the other hand, is preparing for a potential escalation in trade tensions and strategic rivalry.
So a lot of anxiety mixed with some cautious optimism, depending on the region and their specific interests.
It's a complex geopolitical landscape. And Trump's return to the White House adds another layer of complexity and unpredictability.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Trump's victory, the Republican sweep of Congress, the surprising demographic shifts the international reactions. It's clear that this election has dramatically changed the political landscape, both at home and abroad.
It's a true turning point. And we're just beginning to understand the full scope of its implications.
But what about the long-term implications? What does this mean for the future of the U.S., for global affairs, and for the issues you care about? That's what we'll dig into next.
You know, it's fascinating to consider how this election will reverberate on a global scale. We've been focusing on the U.S.
Right.
But the implications extend far beyond its borders.
Right, because what happens in the U.S. doesn't stay in the U.S.
Exactly.
Its decisions have a ripple effect on the whole world.
Yeah.
Especially in the areas you flagged in your analysis.
Absolutely. Take climate change, for example. You highlighted this as a major concern.
Right.
And for good reason. If the U.S. backtracks on its climate commitments, it could undermine global efforts to address this crisis.
And your analysis went deeper, pointing out that it's not just about the U.S.'s own emissions. It's about its role as a global leader.
Yeah.
If the U.S. isn't leading the charge, other countries might be less inclined to make sacrifices.
Precisely. And this lack of leadership could damage the already fragile trust in international climate negotiations. It could create a domino effect where other countries follow suit, leading to a collective failure to meet climate targets.
So it's a potential setback on a global scale with long-term consequences that are hard to even fathom.
And this pattern of potential U.S. retrenchment extends to other areas as well, like trade. You specifically mentioned concerns about protectionist policies.
Right, because Trump's America First rhetoric suggests a shift towards protectionism with potential tariffs and trade barriers. But what does that actually mean for the global economy?
Well, if the U.S. adopts more protectionist policies, it could trigger a wave of retaliatory measures from other countries. Potentially leading to trade wars and a slowdown in global trade.
And that could have a ripple effect on the global economy. Potentially leading to instability and even recession.
Exactly. It could disrupt supply chains, increase prices for consumers, and hinder economic growth worldwide.
So we're not just talking about abstract economic theories.
No.
We're talking about real-world impacts on people's livelihoods.
Absolutely. Protectionist policies can have unintended consequences, hurting the very people they're supposed to help.
It feels like we're on the brink of a major shift, not just in American politics, but in the global order as well.
I think that's a very astute observation. This election could mark a move away from multilateralism and global cooperation towards a more fragmented, nationalistic world.
A world where countries are more focused on their own interests, even if it comes at the expense of global stability and cooperation.
Precisely. And that shift could have profound consequences for everything from climate change to global security.
Okay, so lots to think about on the international front. But let's bring it back home for a moment. We've got a divided nation, a unified Republican government, and a president known for his unconventional approach to politics. You even circled this point in your analysis. What could this mean for American democracy itself?
That's a question that's weighing heavily on many minds. Some worry that the checks and balances that have traditionally protected American democracy could be weakened or even eroded.
And you specifically highlighted concerns about potential executive overreach, the politicization of the judiciary, and the suppression of voting rights.
Those are all valid concerns. We've already seen some of these trends emerge in recent years. And a unified Republican government could embolden those who seek to undermine democratic norms and institutions.
And what about the possibility of further polarization? Could this election exacerbate the divisions we're already seeing?
It's a very real risk. Political rhetoric has become increasingly divisive and inflammatory. And this election could further deepen those divides, making it even harder to find common ground and address pressing challenges.
So we're not just talking about policy disagreements. We're talking about a fundamental breakdown in communication and understanding, a tribalism that makes it difficult to even have a civil conversation about politics.
Exactly. And that breakdown in civil discourse can have a corrosive effect on democracy, making it harder to find compromise, build consensus, and govern effectively.
So what can be done? How do we bridge these divides and move forward as a nation when it feels like we're being pulled further and further apart?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It requires a conscious effort to step outside of our echo chambers, to listen to perspectives that differ from our own, and to engage in respectful dialogue, even when we disagree.
And your analysis highlighted the role of education and media literacy in combating misinformation and fostering critical thinking skills.
Absolutely. We need to equip people with the tools to discern fact from fiction.
Yeah.
To evaluate sources critically. Yeah. And to engage in constructive dialogue.
Okay.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
It's not easy, but it's essential if we want to preserve and strengthen our democracy. It's about rebuilding trust. Yeah. Fostering empathy and finding common ground. Right. Even in the midst of deep divisions.
And that work begins at the individual level. Yeah. In our homes, our communities, and in our online interactions. It's about choosing to engage with those who hold different views. Not to demonize or dismiss them. Right. But to understand their perspectives and find points of connection.
It feels like we're at a crossroads. We can either succumb to the forces of division and polarization, or we can choose a different path. Right. A path towards understanding, dialogue, and a more united future.
And the path we choose will have profound consequences. Right. Not just for ourselves, but for future generations. It's a choice that we make every day in our words, in our actions, and in our commitment to building a more just and equitable society.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of heavy stuff here, but you ended your analysis on a note of hope. And I think it's important to hold on to that.
Absolutely. It's easy to get bogged down in the negativity and the challenges. Yeah. But it's crucial to remember that even in the darkest of times, there's always light, there's always hope, and there's always the possibility of positive change.
Throughout history, the U.S. has faced numerous crises and challenges, and it has always found a way to overcome them, to emerge stronger and more resilient on the other side.
And that's because at its core, American democracy is about the power of the people to shape their own destiny. It's about the belief that even in the face of adversity, we can come together, find solutions, and build a better future for ourselves and for future generations.
And that's a message worth remembering, especially now as we navigate these uncertain and turbulent times.
Exactly. We have a choice to make. Yeah. We can either succumb to fear and division, or we can choose hope and unity. And the choice we make will determine the future of our nation and our world.
So yes, we face challenges, but we also have the capacity, the creativity, and the resilience to meet those challenges head on and create a future that reflects our highest ideals.
And that's a responsibility we all share. It's not about waiting for someone else to fix things. Right. It's about each of us taking ownership of our democracy, engaging in the process, and working together to create the kind of world we want to live in.
All right, so we've covered the election results, the potential policy changes, the international reactions, and the long-term implications, both domestically and globally.
We've delved into the complexities, the anxieties, and the hopes that this election has brought to the forefront.
And we've explored the power of individual voices and collective action to shape the future.
But before we wrap up, I want to bring it back to you.
Okay.
The listener.
Yeah.
You're not just a passive observer in all of this.
Right.
You're an active participant in shaping the future.
You provided the analysis that sparked this entire conversation.
Yes, you're engaged.
Right.
You're informed.
Yeah.
And you care deeply about the direction of our country and our world.
Then your voice matters.
It really does.
Your perspective matters. Your actions matter.
So we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this election?
Yeah.
What are your hopes and fears for the future? What actions, if any, are you inspired to take? Share your thoughts with us.
Right.
Share them with your friends.
Yeah.
Share them with your community. Let's keep this dialogue going.
Because ultimately, the future of our democracy depends on all of us.
It really does.
It depends on our willingness to engage.
Yes.
To listen. To learn.
Yeah.
And to work together to create a more just and equitable world.
And remember, even in times of uncertainty and division, there's always hope. There's always the possibility of change.
Yeah.
The possibility of progress, the possibility of a brighter future.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 2024 election. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep engaging. This is the Deep Dive, signing off.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about the big picture of this election, the policy changes, the global impact. But what about the individual stories, the human side of this political earthquake?
Yeah.
Your analysis actually touches on this.
Isn't it?
And it's something I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Elections are often seen as these massive, abstract events.
Right.
But they're ultimately the sum of millions of individual choices.
Right.
Each shaped by unique experiences and anxieties.
Exactly. And those choices, those personal stories, can give us a deeper understanding of the forces at play in this election.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me in your analysis was the focus on those swing states that flip back to Trump. We can't just lump them together as a monolithic block.
Right.
Each state, each community within those states has its own narrative to tell its own reasons for choosing change.
You even highlighted a quote from a voter in Michigan, a state hit hard by manufacturing job losses, who said, "Trump speaks our language. He understands our struggles."
That's so powerful. That's such a powerful example of how economic anxiety translated into political action.
Right.
For many voters in Michigan and other Rust Belt states, Trump's message of economic nationalism resonated deeply. They felt left behind by globalization and saw Trump as someone who would fight for their interests.
And then there's Arizona, a state with a large and growing Hispanic population grappling with issues of immigration and cultural identity. Your analysis notes how Trump's focus on border security and his appeal to traditional values resonated with a significant portion of this demographic.
It's a reminder that demographics aren't monolithic.
Right.
There's a diversity of viewpoints within any group. And understanding those nuances is crucial to understanding this election.
And you pointed to Pennsylvania as another example of this complexity.
Okay.
A state with a mix of urban and rural communities, each with its own set of concerns. Trump's appeal to rural voters, who often feel ignored by the political establishment, played a significant role in his victory there.
It's a reminder that we need to look beyond the coastal elites and understand the anxieties and aspirations of those in the heartland. These voters felt that their values were being overlooked. And they responded to a candidate who spoke directly to their concerns.
So it's not just about demographics or political ideology. It's about understanding the lived experiences of people on the ground. The challenges they face, the values they hold dear.
Precisely. And those experiences, those values are often far more nuanced and complex than the simplistic narratives we often hear in the media.
Your analysis really emphasizes the importance of listening to those individual stories, of engaging with people who hold different viewpoints, of trying to understand where they're coming from, even if we don't agree with them.
Because that's the only way we can bridge the divides that separate us and build a more united and cohesive society. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even in the midst of political disagreement.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the 2024 election, I want to leave you with this thought, inspired by your own insightful analysis. Elections are important, yes, but they're just one chapter in the ongoing story of our democracy. The real work happens every day in our conversations with our neighbors, in our engagement with our communities, in our efforts to bridge divides and build a better future.
And that's a responsibility we all share. It's about staying informed, staying engaged, and most importantly, staying connected to the human side of politics. It's about remembering that behind the policies and the rhetoric are real people with real lives, real hopes, and real dreams.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for sharing your analysis. It made this exploration all the more insightful.